Hi, I'm Steve Lowry, the editor of the High Low here at the Long Beach Post. I'm joined by my colleague, Asia Morris. Say hi, Asia.
Hello.
Today, we're joined by Stephen Gerhardt, who is the executive director of Walk Long Beach. Hi, Steve.
Hello, how you doing?
And Aaron Rickel. Aaron is the marketing manager for Pedal Movement Cycling. Hi, Aaron.
How's it going?
We asked Aaron and Steve to be here because for a lot of us, walking or riding our bikes is pretty much the only exercise we can kind of get these days. Gyms are closed. It's difficult. But it's also, perhaps for a lot of us, the only chance we have to get out and connect with the city or other people. So we wanted to talk with Aaron and Steve about doing it, getting maximum amount of enjoyment, maximum amount of safety, and about what's going to happen as we go on with this. Steve, I want to start with you. Everyone talks about getting back to some sense of normalcy. Just the other day, in fact, today, Asia will have this great video about gondoliers coming back to the canals in Naples and singing. And people there told us, oh, this feels like we're getting back to normal. And that's what people want. Under normal conditions, Steve, how does Long Beach rank as a city to walk in?
So every year, Walk Score puts out numbers, and Long Beach does pretty well, primarily because the downtown is really walkable. It gets a score of 92 out of 100. But there's parts of the city that really are not very comfortable for walking. Distances are too far. There's not a lot of trees. The traffic is really close. So it's a mixed bag in Long Beach, but overall we do pretty well.
Are you noticing, are you seeing numbers that people are walking more since the stay-at-home orders went in?
Oh, absolutely. People walking in neighborhoods, people walking on some corridors. Numbers are definitely up, and the times of day people walk is definitely broader. So you see a lot more people walking middle of the day, certainly after normal work times or the evening, especially now that the weather's been so nice.
Aaron, Asia wrote a story about people cycling more, and I want to let her follow up, but I just want to begin with this. It mentioned in her story that a lot of people weren't necessarily going out and buying new bikes, but a lot of people were digging into those garages deep to find the old rusty ones and bringing them to shops like yours to get cleaned up. What's it been like for you business-wise as far as people bringing bikes?
I mean, we are as busy as we can be, actually, like tuning up and repairing bikes. We actually just put out a picture of this like really cool old vintage Schwinn that this guy had in his garage for ages, back from the 70s. So it's been pretty cool to see people bring out, bikes that they maybe have had sitting in a garage for 20 or 30 years, or, old bikes that their grandparents maybe passed down to them. But we're definitely, we're just totally overwhelmed. I know a lot of other shops in the area too are just packed with bikes and repairs.
What are you seeing? What are your customers using the bikes for? Do you ask them what intended use is? Is it to go on longer rides or just short trips? What are you seeing so far?
It's a great question. We don't necessarily follow up and ask exactly what people are using them for, but a lot of the bikes that we're seeing are, a lot of beach cruisers, a lot of these kind of just commuter city bikes. And so, if you just look outside in Long Beach, people are riding all over the place. And whether that is small trips to the store to get essential things, or whether that's just getting, some fresh air and sunshine and exercise, like you were saying.
And so that's one of the only forms of recreation right now where people are still able to socially distance. Do you have any tips for how people can ride safely under the circumstances?
Yeah, I think first of all, just following all of the regular guidelines from the health department, making sure that you have a face covering or face mask, because even if you are out on the streets and not many people are around, it's very likely that you'll get to an intersection or you'll pull up to, lock up your bike somewhere and be in the vicinity of other people. So making sure you always have that face mask is good. Avoiding riding in groups too. And I know that can be really challenging because cycling can be a pretty lonely experience if you're just by yourself. But we're really recommending just, not getting out on these big group rides with a bunch of people. Maybe you and a buddy can ride side by side, or, making sure that you have adequate social distancing between each other. But we really just don't want to encourage people to have, more than two people in a group if you're getting out.
Is that hard? You and Asia are both part of cycling culture, and she has told me more than once, the culture is very much communal. You ride, people like to ride in big groups. Has that been a hard message to get through to that particular community?
Yes, absolutely. And, understandably, it's a lot harder to go challenge yourself to go, ride a long distance or get up a steep hill when it's just you, because it's so easy to give up and just turn back around and go get ice cream. Uh, but doing it
Is that
together.
true, Asia?
Yeah, yes and no. I enjoy riding alone a lot. I think more so than some cyclists, but
You're just more dedicated than I am then.
it's so motivating having friends to ride with. And I'm lucky I have a partner I can ride with often, so it's not always just me. But it has been hard. I've been getting a lot of texts from friends and like even teammates like, let's go. And I'm just like, I'll see you after this is over, man. I'm sorry.
Right. But being on a bike, there's really nothing like dropping in behind somebody and just cruising along. That's one of the best things.
So good.
Steve, now, a lot of people don't, like, if you told someone they're exercising while they're walking, they would say, no, I'm just walking. They don't consider it exercise, And so I think there's I don't know if danger is the word, but that people think, well, I've been walking my whole life. Why do I need to know what to do? But are there things people should be doing, especially at these times, if they're going to go out, walk more than, let's say, a block? How should they be treating that activity?
So the main thing is, and it really points out how the cities are built, is the sidewalks are really tight in most places. So if you're passing somebody, stepping off to the side, some people cruise out into the street, on the other side of the cars, those kinds of things. The main thing, and when you're walking, is things like the signal buttons. Don't touch them with your hands. Wear a glove, use your elbow. The more modern buttons, the bigger ones, are easy. Sometimes they're in that little receptacle and they're hard to push. So that's the main thing. And really, like Aaron said, wear your mask, all those kinds of things really help. And when you return home, leave your shoes at the door, wash your hands real good. Those kinds of safety tips, I think people don't think of. Once they're home, it's like, take off your mask. It's like, be cognizant for one more minute once you get home, and then relax.
So I have to admit, I don't do that. Leave your shoes outside.
At the door, on your porch, just inside the door. Some people wear or have like a garden glove that says their walking glove, and they'll just take that whenever they go. So they just grab it, just like with your mask. You grab it, you put it on, put your glove on. Some people wear one glove, so they have a hand free to use their phone. Some people I've seen in your rubber gloves. I've seen dishwashing gloves. You name it. People are figuring out something clever.
Right. So we talked about more people being out there actually walking. I was talking with our managing editor, Melissa Evans, a few days ago, and we were saying, even though this is a time of social distance, I've never felt closer to a lot of people in my community, because people who used to just pass me and pretend I wasn't there, everyone kind of is almost reaching out to each other to kind of say, we're going to get through this. Has that been your experience, Steve?
For sure. We see a lot of people more friendly, wanting to make eye contact for several reasons. One, okay, I'm going left, you're going right. That's part of it. And definitely people are much more friendly, seeking connections. I see a lot more people stopping to chat because it's one of the few times you actually can have that social interaction. Even in lines, waiting to go into the grocery store where people are still maintaining that 6 feet of separation, there's a lot more conversation going on than normal. Like, in a bank line, people aren't chatting, but, there's a little more space, and people are craving that connection, so they definitely are talking.
We're showing our age, Steve, that we remember when there were lines at the bank.
Mm-hmm.
Banks are now the size of Starbucks.
Yeah, interestingly enough, ATMs are one of the things that I'm a little nervous about, because people use them and walk away and nobody's really wiping them down. I noticed that the other day.
Yeah. Steve, your organization has done this really neat thing. I think one came out today, or will come out today, right? Every Wednesday, you're putting out a new neighborhood walk, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we actually Yeah, so we split our time between doing advocacy for public safety or pedestrian safety and promoting walks and getting people together actually to walk. So we haven't been doing that second part. So what we've been doing instead is sending out these virtual walks on Wednesdays. We did send one out this morning. It's in Whaley Park. We want people to take advantage of the jacaranda trees or jacaranda trees that are in bloom. And so every Wednesday we're sending it out. We're not setting a time, so we want people to go on their own time to maintain that separation. The walks are 1.5 to 3 miles typically. What's been interesting is we've gotten more and more requests for longer walks. Hey, what do you have that's 5 miles? So either we're going to start coupling them together. Today we suggested people include walking onto the Cal State campus, which is closed for the students. The grounds are still open for pedestrians, and as long as you maintain good safety, that's great. And we did hear back that most of the facilities that are in use are being cleaned every day, but things like the pyramid or some of the facilities that have been closed for a while are not being cleaned. So just be cognizant of that.
Mm.
Now you have, I was going to talk even more about the routes, the walking routes. If someone wanted to find these, they're on your website, right? And can you talk a little bit about the cards?
Visual aids.
Visual aids.
So we've created about 35 of these so far. They're walking loop cards, map on the front. If I keep it there we go. Map on the front. Description on the back. They're in neighborhoods all over the place, and we've been doing them on request as we did community events, those kinds of things. About a month ago, I actually mapped where we had them, and when there's some really huge gaps. We don't have a map in Rose Park. We don't have any in Cal Heights. For no particular reason, it just hadn't happened. So we're working on some of those. Some of them are themed, like we have one in downtown that just focuses on the high-rise residential towers or Art Deco. Most of them are, again, probably in that 1.5 to 3 mile range. The other thing that we're talking about is putting them in a digital format where you can download an audio file. It'll give you directions as you walk and tell you a little bit more about that. So that's something that we're realizing people would really appreciate having. And we've gotten a lot of feedback. Every week when we put out the card requests, we ask people if they would like some cards. And every week we've been getting, anywhere between 5 and 15 requests for, hey, please send me some cards. I want to walk someplace I haven't been in a while.
Wow.
So, Aaron, I wanted to ask for people that maybe aren't so familiar with cycling around town that are just now getting on their bikes, are there any routes available where people can find easy places to ride that maybe aren't necessarily so crowded? And also how is pedal movement, I guess, encouraging people to ride even after this is all over?
Yeah, we're actually doing a very similar thing. There's a website called Ride Spot that you can go on and look up local routes around. And so we have, we've been developing a whole bunch of routes around Long Beach and trying to be cognizant of the places that are open. We obviously we have our Moonlight Mash route on there, but that goes on the beach path, that has been closed. And so we're trying to make sure that we're not encouraging people to go on spots that aren't open. But we're really fortunate in Long Beach that the bike lane infrastructure is fantastic. A lot of the neighborhoods, especially with lower traffic, are really bikeable. So we've been putting up 1 or 2 of those a week as well. And so we encourage people to hop onto Ride Spot if they're just looking for a place around their town.
I think that was one of the complaints that I saw, was just that since the beach path is closed, a lot of people lost a safe space to ride very far away from traffic. Are you finding that people generally feel safe on the roads, or how are they dealing with that?
It's definitely hard. The beach path is an amazing place to go ride your bike and definitely feel safe. You have sand on both sides. Like what could happen on the beach path? But so I'm not exactly sure whether that is causing people to just not go for a ride altogether. We are trying to give some alternatives that hopefully are just as appealing as the beach path. And fortunately, we definitely don't want to speak on behalf of any city leaders or government agencies, but it sounds like moving into the further phases of reopening the city, that some things like the beach path and parks are going to be some of the first to open back up. So fingers crossed on that. Don't take my word for it until it's officially official. But
I just want to break in. This is a live chat. We're here with Steve Gerhardt of Walk Long Beach, Aaron Rickel of Pedal Movement, and we're talking about cycling and walking during the stay-at-home order times, and actually what's going to happen after. Aaron, you brought, and by the way, I just want to say to everyone, we take questions, and if you have any questions about great places to ride, great places to walk, or any issues around that, please send us a question and we'll ask one of the gentlemen. Aaron and Steve, I want to ask both of you, normally when people talk about safe walking or safe cycling, they're talking about it in terms of cars, like how do you avoid the cars? But our little dirty secret, as we know, is that when we're on that little path at the beach, people who are walking mutter about the cyclist, and the cyclists mutter about the people who are walking. We don't normally talk about this, but we're going there, baby. So, Steve, let me talk with you. What's the issues most pedestrians have with cyclists, and what are things pedestrians can do to make themselves, work along with cyclists?
So to me, the best example is right down there on 2nd Street where the green carpet sharrows went in. People talk about mixing the cyclists with the cars. Really, in many ways, that was done to get the cyclists off the sidewalk because people were coming out of stores and getting hit by bicyclists. So, I think what's actually happened is I see a lot more people riding on bigger streets now and being more comfortable being in the street because there's a lot less traffic. Unfortunately, that traffic is moving much more quickly. And I think drivers are really taking advantage. And there's been, tickets for people going over 100 miles per hour has gone up like 300-400%, which is nuts.
wow.
So, really for it's really how that sidewalk gets used because cyclists really shouldn't be, they're not very well seen on the sidewalk. When they come off into a curb, into an intersection, that's where a lot of problems happen. So, the more we tell cyclists to get more comfortable riding in the street, that helps. And where our concerns come in is not necessarily for what you'd think of as a recreational pedestrian, but somebody who's in a wheelchair, mothers with strollers, people that are a little less mobile, they can't get out of the way as quickly. Older folks who are walking with either a cane or a walker or something like that, those are the ones that we're really the most concerned about. And, unfortunately, just like you said on the bike path, cyclists and pedestrians don't mix very well, and I'll throw one more into the mix, skaters. The hardest thing to do on a bicycle is pass the skater because they're going left and right, left and right. So, and as we've added things like e-scooters, all those kinds of things, all in the same space, it's become much more complicated. And one of the things that we haven't really seen here in Longview, which is unfortunate, it's been tried in other cities, is during this pandemic situation, cities have been opening up more streets for biking and pedestrians. So it's not really like a cyclovia type event. They're just adding a lane, sometimes 2 lanes. And a recent report that came out of Seattle is they've tried it on maybe about 9 miles of streets, and some of them have been so successful, they might even make them permanent because it's really working pretty well.
Wow,
so we'd love to try some of those kinds of things. And I feel like now that we're talking more about reopening, we're losing that opportunity to try some of these things. But it'd be great to see a street or two in Long Beach closed, on the weekends, a lane or two, just to give people a little bit more space, but it hasn't happened quite yet.
I want to jump on that, although I want to let Aaron talk about cyclists and pedestrians. Right now, though there are issues, this really is a nice time that more people are cycling and more people are walking. Aaron, let me start with you. How do we make this, elongate this, as opposed to just being a moment in time, and the moment we can all get back in our cars, we're back in our cars? How do we continue this momentum?
Yeah, that's definitely interesting and something we've been asking ourselves as well. It is, one thing that we talk about in cycling a lot is barriers to entry. And one of the very top barriers to entry for cycling is fear of cars on the road. And so it's interesting to note that with the pandemic, traffic goes way down and cycling and walking go way up. And so it's interesting just how quickly like cars are off the road, fewer cars are on the road, more bike lanes are, just open for cyclists, and immediately people take advantage of it. And so I wonder, like Steve, like you were saying in Seattle, with some of these, partial road closures and alterations, they're considering making those permanent. That's something we really want to be aware of too, is as cars start to get back on the road, if we see those, cycling numbers start to drop, then that's just kind of further evidence that that people do feel unsafe. And so we do have some solutions, where having separated bike lanes like the beach path, or like on, I think it's on 2nd Street that has the pylons going, in the separated bike lane, like those kind of protections just remove that barrier to entry. And so people feel more comfortable to get on there, and they're not on the sidewalks. They're not feeling vulnerable in the street with the cars, and they have this little area that is kind of just set aside for them.
Do you think it's possible, Steve, that because of this, I think a lot of people could never imagine their life without a car. And a lot of people have now lived a few weeks without a car and said, okay, I got by. Is it possible that that's one of the keys that has happened during this time, that people can actually imagine themselves at least not using their car as much?
I think so. And I think part of the other experiment is people that had office jobs and aren't going to the office, they're seeing, maybe I don't have to go to the office every day. And we certainly don't expect people to walk or bike everywhere they go, just when it makes sense. And I think what a lot of people are discovering is there's probably no easier way to take care of errands than on a bicycle, if that's the right distance, or walk. You walk right into the store, you don't have to find a place to park, all those kinds of things. And I think that experience hopefully will last for a little while, but really it's creating more walkable communities that's going to make that last longer. And, interestingly, groups like the Real Estate Association and the National Association of Realtors found that the demand for walkable communities is much higher than what they provide. Right now, it's something like less than 15% of communities that are newly built or infill development are considered walkable, but the demand is much closer to 65-70%. So people want that kind of environment. And to me, that's the interesting question, is now that people have gotten used to the idea of not driving quite so much, whether they really adopt that multimodal lifestyle where they walk when it makes sense, they bike when it makes sense, they take transit when it makes sense, and they drive when it is really the best option.
Yeah, we know even if you took 50% of your trips by bicycle or by walking or by alternative transportation, what a difference that would have just in traffic or in your gas costs or in finding parking, all these things that people generally find frustrating with living in a city that has lots of cars in it.
Steve, you did a podcast with us probably about 6 months ago. And on it, you mentioned something about if you're driving a car, it's so A to B. So you almost see nothing. In fact, most of us who drive certainly like a certain route over and over have the experience of having no knowledge of what happened after the car turned on. You just magically, right? Because you just zone out.
You just appear.
But you pointed out that if you go, like you said, maybe on a shopping trip, either walking or riding, the possibilities of discovering things, of seeing things that you had never seen before, things that maybe you want to like, oh, look at that restaurant that I didn't notice was there, so much higher than if you're in a car. So that the city becomes so much richer to you.
Absolutely. And think about when you travel. When you travel someplace, the first thing you do is wherever you stay, you drop your stuff, you go walk around, you check out the area, and you start to get a sense of it. And people have, when you're driving, if you're driving slower, you will pick up a little bit more, but you miss so much. And certainly, like you said, you go unconscious. You're listening to podcasts or the radio, you're talking on the phone, and you really don't notice anything. When you're biking, your head's up, you're looking around, you hear things. Part of the other thing is the sound. In a car, you can control the sound pretty much. You've got the radio up loud, even if you've got the windows open or the windows are closed, you really don't get any sense of things. When you're cycling or walking, smells, sounds, all those kinds of things add to the experience. Plus you see things that you wouldn't. People discover all kinds of little nuanced things, little pop-up art projects, little fairy gardens underneath a bush, in front of somebody's house that you would never see unless you just happen to be walking by their house and it catches your eye.
And very little road rage in walking, right? Very little people just going berserk. It happens every now and then.
Usually not. I think the only road rage I see is people crossing the street, and somebody doesn't see you and they start to go, sort of like a right hook and a bike, and they slam on the brakes and they yell at you because they didn't see you. That's the one we see the most.
Hey, Aaron, I wanted to give you a chance. What is something when a cyclist is coming up on, let's say, like a beach path, and there's people walking? What starts to give you guys anxiety about seeing those people? Like, what are you thinking when you see someone walking?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest issue is just disparity of speed. You can go so much faster on a bicycle than you can by foot, or even with scooters and all of this. And so, definitely just an awareness. I mean, the first thing that we're always repeating to cyclists is just ride within your limits. Make sure that if you see people ahead of you, if you're on a shared use path, make sure that you're giving people enough space to do something unpredictable, that you're giving people enough space to be able to stop. Another really easy thing too is just putting a bell on your bike. They're super fun, first of all, and they're not just for kids. They totally are for adults and anyone riding as well. Just give it a ring when you're coming up behind people. It makes them aware. They can be aware of where you're going. It just kind of is a benefit for everyone.
So when you do hear the bell, because I've heard the bell, that's not necessarily a cyclist being angry. He's just letting you know.
Mm-hmm.
No, yeah, I'll personally, if I'm going in a place where people are all over, I'll kind of just constantly be dinging in if people are there, just to make people aware, not frustrated. It's a shit, everybody else is out there walking and using the path in whatever way they want to as well. A thing that we definitely are trying to push on with cyclists too is like, not that they're necessarily teams, but if there are teams, walkers and cyclists are on the same side.
Mm-hmm.
And we're both vulnerable road users. And what cyclists, I think, forget is that pedestrians are even more vulnerable than cyclists are. That a cyclist can still, hurt somebody pretty bad if they're not paying attention. And so just definitely trying to be aware. Cyclists are kind of in that middle ground of, we're definitely not cars and can really be hurt by cars, but we're not pedestrians, and we need to be aware that pedestrians are also vulnerable.
We're almost out of time. Asia, you got one more?
Yeah, just to pivot, pedal movement as an essential business, what are some of the new challenges that you guys are facing as far as just running the space and also staying safe?
Yeah, I mean, one of the biggest things is just events. We love just getting in touch with the community in person and doing our bike valets at the farmers markets and at beach streets and all of that. And so we're definitely missing that connection with the community. And one of the things that we've been trying to do this month, as May is Bike Month, is we have an online ride challenge that hopefully is bringing together a little bit of that community, where you qualify for, based on how many miles you go, you can qualify for different raffles and prizes that we're giving away. You can check the leaderboard, see what, how far your friends are going. And so we're really just trying to integrate as much of that like community and the sort of feeling that you get when you're riding with your friends.
Aaron, every now and then you'll see someone who's like visiting the area, especially around the beach, and they think, well, I should ride a bike. And you can tell that person shouldn't be on a bike right now. Like it's very kind of, if you've got someone who's, again, got the bike out of the garage, hey, they bring it to you, I'm sure you like see them come up or leave and you're going, oh man, like is there a place you could recommend if you're getting back on the bike? What's probably the safest place you can go ride where at least you could get maybe a few minutes in by yourself? You're not going to hurt yourself or anybody else.
Not Ocean Boulevard.
Not Ocean Boulevard.
I could tell you a bunch of places. I could definitely tell you places where you shouldn't go. I mean, hey, first of all, I have to say, like, everyone belongs on a bike, whether you've ridden 30 years, whether you ride every single day. But if you're not feeling super confident and you want to kind of brush up on your skills, not Ocean Boulevard, either finding a parking lot or even just your residential street. A lot of times are lower traffic. You can kind of get used to doing some turning and stuff. We're another plug, we're doing partnering with the city and doing a couple bicycle basics classes. Our first one is coming up this Saturday, and that's bicycling in the age of COVID, and what can we do to stay safe. And then 2 Saturdays from now, we're doing one that's just your bicycle basics. And so how to stay safe, going over hand signals, going over the right way to be on the road. So if you're feeling a little wary, you haven't ridden a bike in a long time, you want to brush up on those skills, definitely are safe places to do that, and make sure that you're good before you take to the crowded streets.
Speaking of being wary, Aaron, will you show us your hair? Aaron got a haircut.
Savage.
We're doing so. It's
No, it's
actually
fine to
better
me.
than expected.
Oh, it's
When you
looking
look
good.
This is a little funky. This is a home haircut. Like,
And you said when you first got it cut, it looked fine, right?
oh yeah, right when it was done, it was perfect. And then a week or two goes by, and it's a little. This actually looks better than I thought that it did.
We're all about good news, brother.
Great.
Hey, Aaron, Steve, thank you very much. Hope to see you out there having a good time and being safe.
All right, definitely
Thank
see you out
you.
on the sidewalks.
We'd
Absolutely.
like to thank you for joining us. Be sure every afternoon at 1 to check in on live chat. I'm Steve Lowry. Have a nice day.